I was too focused on what I wanted, ignoring his needs. I got surprised with divorce papers. Hey Reddit, first time posting on here. My name is Olivia, and I'm 27 years old. My husband's name is Jason, and he's also 27. We've known each other practically our entire lives. Our families lived in the same neighborhood, and we grew up together, so there was always this natural bond between us. But it wasn't until high school that we really started seeing each other in a different light. We dated through the last couple of years of high school, and though we broke up for a while afterward, we found our way back to each other in college. It was like we were always meant to be together, no matter the detours. Fast forward a few years, and here we are, married for about 3 years now. It's crazy to think about how much history we share. I used to tell myself that no one could ever know me like Jason does, and that's what made us so perfect for each other. We had this chemistry that was just electric. Our communication was always on point, or at least I thought it was. We used to stay up late at night talking about everything, our dreams, our fears, and what we wanted our future to look like. We had it all mapped out, buying a house, building our careers, having children. I honestly believed we were on the same page and that things were solid between us. I really thought we had it all figured out. There wasn't a doubt in my mind that Jason and I were going to spend the rest of our lives together. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but who doesn't? I always thought we were the couple who could weather any storm, but recently I've come to realize that while I was so focused on what I wanted, my vision of our perfect life, I might have overlooked some cracks that were forming in our relationship. Cracks that I never even noticed, but that Jason must have been feeling all along. It's easy to get caught up in your own world, your own expectations, and your own desires. I see that now. I was so wrapped up in my own needs, in what I thought our life should look like, that I didn't pay enough attention to what Jason might have been going through. I'm beginning to now realize that maybe I was too focused on myself, on what I wanted, rather than what we needed as a couple. I never imagined that things would take the turn they have, and I certainly never thought that I'd be here writing this. I didn't realize it quickly enough, but I was too focused on what I wanted, and constantly ignoring Jason's needs. In my mind, I believed that everything I was doing was for the good of both of us. That belief became my go-to justification for prioritizing my own wants over my spouse's needs. It was like I convinced myself that as long as I was working toward what I saw as our future, that was all that mattered. But now I can see how one-sided that perspective was, and how much it hurt our relationship. Even when Jason tried to communicate his feelings to me, I would either dismiss or downplay them. He would tell me he was feeling neglected or overwhelmed, and instead of listening and trying to understand, I would brush it off. I'd say things like, "Oh, you're just overthinking it," or "You'll see, it'll all work out in the end." I genuinely thought I was being reassuring, when in reality, I was shutting down any real opportunity for us to connect and for him to feel heard. One of the biggest issues was how I handled our finances. I made significant financial decisions without even consulting Jason. Whether it was buying an expensive item that I thought we needed or investing in something risky with our money, I just went ahead and did it. I justified these decisions by telling myself it was a smart move for our future. But the truth is, I didn't stop to consider how it might affect our financial stability or how Jason might feel about it. I didn't ask for his opinion, didn't have a discussion about it. I just assumed he'd be on board because in my mind, it was the right thing to do. I also prioritized spending time with my friends or attending social events, and would often drag Jason along to events he wasn't interested in. To me, maintaining an active social life was crucial, and I wanted us to be seen as that couple who had it all together, successful, sociable, always out and about. But when Jason expressed a desire for quiet, quality time together, I would dismiss it. I'd insist that we needed to keep up appearances and maintain our social connections. I was so focused on how we were perceived externally that I completely overlooked what was happening internally in our relationship. One of the hardest things to admit now is how I constantly overlooked Jason's emotional needs. I was so caught up in my own life, my own goals, that I rarely stopped to notice when he needed comfort or understanding. There were times when he was going through something really difficult, But instead of being there for him, I was too wrapped up in my own issues to even offer support. I think I convinced myself that my struggles were more significant, or that he was strong enough to handle his on his own, but that was just another way of avoiding the real work of being in a relationship. And when it came to major life decisions, I refused to compromise. Whether it was about where we would live, how we would spend our time, or even when to start a family, I was always adamant about my position. I'd tell myself that I was just being decisive, when in reality, I was shutting Jason out of the decision-making process altogether. I didn't want to have a genuine discussion, didn't want to consider his feelings on the matter. I just wanted things to go the way I thought they should. There was even a time I forced Jason to renovate our home to match my vision of a perfect home. It was something I had dreamed about for years, a beautiful remodeled space that reflected my taste and style. But Jason wasn't interested in the renovation at all. He was more concerned about the cost and the disruption it would cause in our lives. He told me how he felt, and I knew that it would be expensive, messy, and time-consuming. Yet I was so fixated on having the home I wanted that I completely disregarded his feelings. I went ahead with the renovations anyway because in my mind, my desire for a beautiful home outweighed his comfort and financial concerns. The project took longer than expected, cost more than we had budgeted, and the constant noise and mess made our home really stressful. Jason became increasingly withdrawn during this time, and I just assumed he'd come around once he saw how amazing the house looked, but that never happened. Instead, it drove a wedge between us that I didn't see until it was too late. I also had this habit of taking up expensive hobbies without even considering the financial stress it would place on us. We had a joint account and paid for everything together, so any significant expenses were supposed to be a mutual decision. But I didn't see it that way. I would dive headfirst into hobbies like photography or horseback riding, spending large amounts of money on equipment, lessons, and whatever else I needed. Jason had been very vocal about the need for us to save money, especially as we were trying to build a safety net for our future. But I would dismiss his concerns, telling him that these hobbies were important for my personal growth and that I needed them to feel fulfilled. The saddest part was that I never lasted long at any of these hobbies. I would quickly grow bored and move on to something else, which made Jason frustrated because I had stretched our finances thin for nothing. He told me he felt like he was watching our hard-earned money disappear into the wind, and I couldn't understand why he was so upset. I saw it as a necessary expense for my happiness. Things got so bad that I began neglecting Jason's health for the sake of my social life. Even when he was feeling unwell and would ask if we could stay home and rest over the weekend, I would refuse. I would insist that we go out for the plans we had already made because, in my mind, maintaining our social life was more important than his need to rest. I couldn't stand the thought of canceling plans or missing out on a social event, even if it meant dragging Jason along when he was clearly not up for it. I was so focused on how others perceived us, how we looked as a couple, that I completely disregarded what Jason needed at that moment. I would tell myself that he could rest later, that he was just being dramatic, and that we had to show up for our friends. But in reality, I was being selfish, putting my wants above his well-being, and it only made him feel more isolated and unsupported. And then there was the time I bought a new car without even consulting him. We had a perfectly good family car that Jason was happy with, but I had always wanted a more expensive, flashier model. I decided to trade in our car and buy the new one without even discussing it with Jason. When I finally told him, he was shocked and concerned. He expressed that he was happy with our current car and didn't want to take on additional debt, especially when we didn't need to. But I still went ahead with the purchase because, once again, I felt that my wants were more important than his concerns. I justified it by telling myself that it was a necessary upgrade, that it would make me happier, but in doing so, I ignored how this decision would affect our financial stability and how it made Jason feel. I would even plan expensive vacations for us to luxury destinations that I had always dreamed of visiting. I had a list of places in my mind: beaches with crystal clear waters, 5-star resorts, and cities rich in culture and history. These were the kinds of trips I had fantasized about for years, and now that we were financially stable, I was determined to make them happen. Of course, Jason would express his concerns every time I brought up the idea. He was worried about the cost and how it would affect our savings. He would suggest more modest trips, ones that would still allow us to relax and enjoy ourselves without breaking the bank. But I always insisted on the expensive vacations. I would dismiss his worries about money as unnecessary anxiety and would tell him that we could just put it on a credit card and figure it out later. I convinced myself that these trips were necessary. Jason would go along with it, but I could see the stress in his eyes every time we boarded a plane to another expensive destination. I just chose to ignore it, believing that once we were there, everything would be worth it. There was even a time when I insisted on moving to a new city for our careers. I had received a job offer that I was really excited about. It was a significant step up in my career, and I saw it as the perfect opportunity to advance. Jason, on the other hand, was very hesitant about moving. He had a stable job that he enjoyed, and we had built a life in our current city. He had close ties to the community, friends he valued, and a routine that made him happy. But I was so focused on what this move could do for me that I completely disregarded his concerns. I pushed for the move relentlessly, telling him that it was the best thing for both of us, even though deep down, I knew it was more about what I wanted. We were on the brink of moving when, unexpectedly, my current job offered me the same promotion, allowing us to stay where we were. I decided to take the offer and stay, but the damage had already been done. I would also pursue personal projects without considering how they impacted Jason or our relationship. I had a habit of diving into things like starting a side business, writing a book, or getting heavily involved in a community group. These were all things that consumed a lot of my time and energy. I would expect Jason to be supportive, to understand why these projects were important to me, and to drop everything to help me when I needed it. I assumed that because these things were important to me, they should automatically be important to him too. But I never stopped to check if he was okay with the time I was dedicating to them, or if he needed more of my attention. I would spend hours, sometimes days, completely absorbed in my projects, leaving Jason to fend for himself emotionally and physically. When he would ask if we could spend more time together, I would brush him off, telling him that I needed to focus on what I was doing and that he should be proud of me for being so driven. I was so focused on what I wanted that I failed to see how my actions were affecting Jason. I was only thinking about myself. I expected Jason to always be there, to always understand and support me, but I didn't offer him the same in return. I can now see how all of these incidents added up. They weren't just mistakes. They were patterns of behavior that showed how little I considered Jason's needs. I was so focused on what I wanted, on how I thought our life should be, that I completely ignored the fact that a marriage is supposed to be a partnership. I bulldozed over Jason's feelings and concerns, convinced myself that I was doing what was best for both of us, when, in reality, I was only thinking about myself. I started to notice that Jason seemed distant and unhappy. It wasn't sudden, but rather a gradual shift in his behavior that I foolishly ignored. He began to withdraw emotionally and physically. He was spending more time away from home and engaging less with me when we were together. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself that he was just stressed from work or going through a phase. But the truth was, I didn't want to face the possibility that something deeper was wrong between us. I was so wrapped up in my own world that I failed to see the cracks forming in our relationship. As time went on, the distance between us grew, and our conversations became increasingly awkward. We started having more arguments, most of which were triggered by me overriding his wishes or dismissing his needs. Jason, who had always been patient and understanding, started getting noticeably angrier whenever I insisted on having things my way. It was like I could see the frustration building in his eyes, but instead of addressing it, I would stubbornly defend my choices, convinced that I was doing what was best for both of us. I believed that as long as my intentions were good, Jason would eventually come around. But I was wrong, terribly wrong. Things finally came to a head when I did something incredibly insensitive, something that I now regret more than anything else. Jason is severely allergic to cats, a fact that I am well aware of, but I have always loved cats and had wanted one for as long as I could remember. I convinced myself that it wouldn't be a big deal, that Jason could somehow manage his allergy, and that having a cat would bring me the happiness I felt I deserved. So, without discussing it with him, I went ahead and got a cat and brought it home as if it were just another impulse decision. When Jason came home and saw the cat, he was horrified. He immediately reminded me of his allergy, but instead of acknowledging my mistake, I dug in my heels. I told him that I had come up with a plan to keep the cat in a separate room and that we could work around his allergy. Jason refused, clearly upset, and told me that this was a huge problem. But I didn't back down. I accused him of being selfish, telling him that the cat needed us and that we could make it work if he just tried harder. That's when Jason exploded. He had never raised his voice at me like that before, and the force of his anger took me completely by surprise. He laid into me, pouring out years of pent-up frustration. He accused me of always being selfish, of only thinking about myself and never considering his feelings or needs. He told me that he was done being second place in our marriage, done with me constantly prioritizing my wants over his well-being. I had pushed him too far this time, and he was no longer willing to tolerate it. Before I could fully process what was happening, Jason started packing his things. I was in shock. I had never seen him this angry, and I didn't know how to react. In the past, Jason had always resigned himself to my decisions, no matter how much they bothered him. This time, though, he was different. He was resolute, and I could see that I had crossed a line that I couldn't uncross. I tried begging him not to go, but he refused to listen. He ignored my begging, told me to enjoy my time with the cat before walking out the door. For days now, I've been trying to call him. I really want to talk and make things right, but he won't answer. My messages go unread, my calls unanswered. I'm left alone in our home. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel so confused, lost, and heartbroken. I never imagined it would come to this. I would really appreciate any advice that I can get. Reddit can be helpful sometimes. Update. No. Hey Reddit, I don't know if you all still remember my original post. It's been a few weeks since I made it, and I haven't updated since then. If you're curious or don't remember it, you can check it out on my profile. The truth is, after posting, I got a lot of hate and blame thrown at me, and it really hit me hard. The comments were harsh, and it made me feel embarrassed and ashamed of myself. I guess that's why I avoided updating for so long. But I'm finally back with an update, and it's not the news I hoped to share. After Jason left, he completely cut off communication with me for about a week. I kept calling, messaging, and begging him to talk to me, but he just wouldn't respond. I found out that he was staying at his sister's place, so I even tried showing up there and at his workplace, hoping to get him to talk to me. But he refused. He was so adamant that he even got security to escort me out of his workplace. That really hurt, but I couldn't blame him. I had pushed him to that point. Eventually, after about a week, Jason finally agreed to talk to me. I suggested we meet in person, thinking that maybe if he could see how sorry I was, it might help. But he refused and said it would be better if we talked on the phone. I should have known something was up with that, but I was too busy and focused on trying to fix things to even think about it. We had a long phone call, hours maybe. During that call, we went over everything, every issue that had bothered us over the years. Jason laid it all out, reminding me of the countless times I had chosen my wants over his needs. He said he couldn't do it anymore. Hearing that felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice-cold water over me. I was frozen with fear and disbelief. When I asked him what he meant by done, he said he wanted a divorce. I broke down, crying and pleading with him not to go through with it. I asked him if there was anything I could do, begged him to give me another chance. But then he said something that really hit home. He told me that he had given me countless chances by staying with me and hoping that I would change. He said that what I did, the cat situation, was the final straw, the limit he couldn't forgive. Jason told me that if I hadn't done something so selfish and hurtful, he might still be at home, trying to make things work. But he said that the only reason he left was because he was at his wit's end, that his cup of frustration had overflowed. He said he had waited so many times for me to change, but I never did. And now, he was finally done. He said it didn't matter if I wanted to change now or if he came back home. He simply didn't want anything to do with me anymore. I cried and cried, but even my tears couldn't move him. It felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me, and I was falling into an abyss with no way out. I was so confused and heartbroken. I didn't understand how things had gotten so bad. I started talking to my friends and family, hoping they would help me make sense of it all, but instead they told me that they had seen this coming. They said that they had noticed how I always put my wants above Jason's needs, and that I had been selfish for years. Even when they tried to gently point it out to me, I either brushed them off or ignored their concerns. So eventually, they stopped saying anything to avoid seeming rude or nosy. Hearing this from my closest friends and family was like a punch to the gut. I started to wonder if I had been blind to my own behavior this whole time. Had I really been that selfish? Had I really hurt Jason that much without even realizing it? I'm struggling to come to terms with everything. It feels like my world is falling apart, and I'm the one who caused it. I don't know how to fix this, or if it's even fixable. Jason seems so determined to move on without me, and I'm terrified that I've lost him for good. The thought of my marriage being over and it being all my fault is almost too much to bear. I don't know what to do next. I've been trying to hold myself together, but I'm at my breaking point. I feel so alone and lost, and I can't stop replaying everything in my mind, wondering how it all went so wrong.
Edit that.
I could really use some guidance right now, and sorry for the long post. I just needed to get this off my chest. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. First of all, to answer a common question I keep getting. The cat. A lot of you have been asking what happened to the cat, so here it is. I've rehomed the cat to a trusted friend of mine. I'm sorry, but I just couldn't keep it. I thought having a cat would be easier, but it turned out to be a lot more work than I imagined. And honestly, considering the cat was the cause of the argument that drove Jason away, I thought maybe if I gave it up, he might come back home. But no, things haven't changed. I've done everything I can think of to try and fix this mess, but Jason still won't forgive me. I think I've finally come to terms with the fact that my marriage might really be over, and it's all my fault. It's a hard pill to swallow, but it's the truth. I've been crying to everyone I can, Jason's sister, his parents, my parents, begging them to help me talk to him, but none of them want to get involved. I think they all secretly agree that I deserve what's happening. Even my own parents aren't on my side. They keep telling me that I need to accept the consequences of my actions. It's so devastating to realize that no one is standing up for me, but I guess it's also a sign of how badly I messed up. And then, the worst of it happened just a few days ago. Jason came over with his sister to pack up the rest of his stuff. I tried to talk to him. I cried. I begged. But he didn't even look at me. He just focused on packing while his sister kept her eyes down, clearly uncomfortable. The only thing he said to me was that I should expect to get served with divorce papers soon. That's when it really hit me that this is the end. He's really leaving me, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. I noticed that Jason seems to have lost some weight, which is worrying. I don't know if it's because of the stress or if he's just not taking care of himself. Either way, it breaks my heart to see him like that, because I know I'm the reason he's suffering. I don't even know what to do anymore, Reddit. I feel like I'm on autopilot, just going through the motions without really being there. I just want to crawl under a rock and hide forever. But unfortunately, I still have to face the real world. It's so hard to keep going when everything inside you is falling apart, but life doesn't stop. I have to get up every day, go to work, and pretend like everything's fine when it's anything but. I'm at my wit's end, and I don't know how to keep going. I feel like I've lost everything that mattered, and it's all my fault. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me, like it always is. Using Reddit as a soundboard has been really effective for me, even though the criticism can be harsh at times. Honestly, the feedback, good or bad, has helped me see things more clearly, and it's been a bit of a reality check. I never thought I'd be one to air my dirty laundry online, but here I am, finding comfort in the anonymity and the collective wisdom, and sometimes harsh truths, from strangers. Even though it's a bit of a double-edged sword, I'm still going to keep updating here because, at the end of the day, it helps me process everything that's happening. Now, to explain what I meant by some people finding this post, 2 significant things have happened since I last updated. The first is something I was dreading but knew was inevitable. About a week ago, I got served. Yes, it's exactly what you're thinking. Divorce papers. I tried to hold it together when it happened, but the moment I saw the papers, my resolve crumbled, and I broke down. I cried so much that my mom had to come over and stay with me for a few days because she was genuinely worried about me. My parents, especially my mom, have been supportive in the only way they know how. They've made it clear that they know I messed up, that all of this is my fault. They've acknowledged that I was wrong, that I ruined my marriage, but they're still my parents. They still love me, and they're worried sick about the state I'm in. I honestly don't know how I'd be getting through this without them. Even though they're disappointed in me, they're trying their best to help me pick up the pieces. The second thing that happened was even more unexpected. A few days ago, I got a message from Jason. It wasn't the kind of message I was hoping for, though. He sent me a link to a Reddit post, my Reddit post. As it turns out, one of our mutual friends stumbled upon it. This friend apparently read the post, did the math, and realized that the story sounded eerily familiar. They connected the dots, figured out that it was my post, and then sent the link to Jason. When Jason reached out to me, he told me he was pretty sure the post was mine, and that everything in it correlated with what had been happening between us. I was mortified when he sent me that message. I felt so exposed. I admitted to him that it was indeed my post, and explained that I'd been using Reddit as a way to vent, process my thoughts, and get advice. He didn't seem particularly offended, but he was definitely surprised. He knows I'm not the type to share personal stuff on social media, let alone a platform like Reddit, so I think it caught him off guard. It was an awkward conversation, to say the least. So, that's where things stand right now. I don't really have anything else to update on at the moment. For now, I'm just trying to keep my head above water. I'm doing my best to stay alive, literally and figuratively. I've been going to work every day, trying to keep up appearances and not let on that my life is falling apart. For a while, I was really lazy at work, just going through the motions, but I've realized that if I don't get my act together, I could get fired, and that's the last thing I need right now. So I'm buckling down. I go to work, I smile, I pretend that everything is fine, even though it's anything but. It's exhausting, but I don't have much of a choice. If I lose my job on top of everything else, I'm not sure how I'd cope. For now, I'm just taking it one day at a time. I'll update you all if anything changes, or if I have something worth sharing. Thanks for reading, and for those of you who've been supportive, even if it was tough love. Thank you for helping me see things for what they really are. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. So I said I'd update if anything significant happened, and for a while, nothing did. That's why I went radio silent. But now I finally have something worth updating on. The divorce has been finalized. I'm here to fill you in, like I promised. First of all, the divorce went through pretty quickly. There was nothing dragging it out, no disputes, no second thoughts, nothing holding it back. Even though I didn't want the divorce, I didn't want to make things any more difficult for Jason either. So I guess it was a pretty straightforward process, if I can even use that word to describe something so painful. We didn't have any debts to split, thankfully. Well, to be more accurate, we didn't have any debts that Jason had to worry about. All the debts we had were mine, and I've taken full responsibility for them. Looking back, I realize how reckless I was with our finances. All those times I insisted on expensive vacations, even when we couldn't really afford them. All those times I bought really expensive stuff that we didn't even need. And all the times I upgraded our car to a more expensive model that Jason didn't even want. Those decisions all led to debt. But those are my debts to pay, and I'm working on it. I've already made some progress, so I'm not overly worried about that part. We didn't have any kids, so child custody wasn't an issue. And since we weren't married for a very long time, neither of us qualified for spousal support. It was a clean break in that sense. Prior to this, we had already separated our finances. After Jason left, he took 50% of our joint account, which was rightfully his, and left the other half for me. We had sorted that out long before the divorce was finalized, so there was no mess there. The only real issue was the house. In the end, I ended up buying Jason out. We had 3 options. Jason could buy me out, I could buy him out, or we could sell the house. Jason didn't want the house because, as he admitted, he stopped liking it the moment I remodeled it against his wishes. He left the decision up to me. Either we sell it or I buy him out. I chose to keep it, even though it's now a very painful reminder of everything that went wrong. It's the last physical connection I have to Jason, and maybe that's why I couldn't let it go. It's also worth noting that I was the one who picked out the location, even though Jason wasn't too keen on it, but because it was closer to my workplace, I insisted on it. So, in a way, it made the most sense for me to stay here. So, yeah, I'm still in the house. That's pretty much it. I don't know if I'm forgetting anything. The divorce is finalized, and now I'm just trying to live, if you can call it that. I feel horrible every day. In fact, my mom and dad were just here again. They stayed for about 2 weeks, trying to convince me to come home so they could take better care of me. It's obvious that this whole thing has taken a huge toll on me. I've lost a lot of weight, and my work performance has dropped, even though I'm trying my best to keep it up. I don't hang out with my friends as much as I used to. It's ironic, really. Back then, I was all about social appearances. I'd drag Jason to every event, insisting that we had to keep up the image of the perfect couple who had it all, and honestly, for a while, I actually thought we had it all. But now that Jason's gone, I couldn't care less about social appearances. I can't even remember the last time I went out with any of my friends. The only times I do go out, I go alone. I sit at a bar, drink, and think about how I got to this pathetic point in my life. I think about all the wrong choices I've made, and it's hard not to feel like I've ruined everything. I'd be lying if I said I was hopeful, or that I think things will get better. The truth is, I don't think they will. I know this is all my fault. I'm not happy. I'm not happy at all. I miss Jason every single day. I miss how we used to be, and I miss everything about us. This was the person I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, and now he's gone. I don't think I'll ever be as vulnerable or in love with anyone else the way I was with Jason. He was my soulmate, and I threw it all away. So, yeah, that's it. I'll probably update if I have anything worth sharing. Thank you for reading, and for those of you who followed my posts, haha, I appreciate the support. Reddit has been such a useful soundboard for me, even if it's just to vent and feel a little less like crap and alone in all of this.